Secretary Mike Pompeo, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Good to be with you.
Listen, life hasn't slowed down for you. You're a pretty busy guy. I noticed there was some light travel to Iowa and New Hampshire, even.
There was. I didn't travel to New Hampshire, but I spoke to the Republican Party fundraising event there last week by Zoom. But I was up
Okay.
in Iowa helping Representative Ashley Hinson. I was in Nebraska helping General Bacon, Congressman from Omaha. I was down in Texas helping Sarah Sanders in her race for governor in Arkansas. All good stuff, making sure 2022 is the complete blowout for the Republicans.
Man, I feel like, is this just something that happens when you're Secretary of State? You just can't stop traveling? How about you take a break, huh?
I did. I took a couple of weeks off. It was all good. And this travel was a little easier, right? Couple-hour flights instead of a day and a half. So all good.
Well, I love that you're engaged. I tease because I know how you love traveling the country. But I mean, some people have also taken notice that you could be a potential presidential contender in 2024. Have you given that any thought?
It's always flattering when people talk like that. Uh, I love this country. I am always up for a good fight. We are in an enormous fight with the progressive left. There's no doubt about that. Uh, I'm going to focus on the next year and a half, making sure that they don't own both houses of Congress come January of 2023. And then everything else will settle out. We'll see what happens after that. It was fun to be up in Iowa. Everybody's still excited. Everybody still understands that the challenges that America faces uh, are in a better place today because of what we did these past 4 years, but they're under assault today. And so they are anxious to get back at it. It was fun to be up there with them and help them think through how we should approach that.
Yeah, well, look, I know nobody's going to bully you into running for anything you don't want to. Lord knows we tried to do that a couple years ago in Kansas.
You did. It's true.
You have a spine of steel, sir.
I appreciate that. You were most gracious and very kind. I appreciated the effort.
So one of the things, and I noticed the New York Times picked up on, they were aghast that you had some commentary on the Biden administration. My first thought was, holy smokes, I wonder if they've met John Kerry or Hillary Clinton, right? They're trying to, I guess, somehow presume that you are stepping outside the bounds of a Secretary of State by making observations about your successors. But I'll tell you, you're right on. What do you think is the biggest problem that each in the outset of the Biden administration they're creating
Yeah.
for themselves with foreign policy?
Well, Josh, back to the New York Times piece for just a second. It was an odd piece in one sense. The story that somehow I wasn't conforming to the genteel diplomatic niceties that former secretaries of state had. First of all, I didn't do that when I was a secretary of state either.
Right.
We were pretty straightforward. I'm from Kansas. We just kind of, people ask and you tell them what you're thinking. But yeah, the hypocrisy wasn't odd. To watch the New York Times pretend that history was something that they didn't have to consider wasn't surprising to me at all. I mean, the woman who wrote that article completely disconnected from any sense of reality without acknowledging that previous secretaries of state had done precisely this. They'd continued to make the case for what they did. I've tried. I hope this administration is successful. Secretary Blinken did some good work sanctioning senior Chinese leaders for what they've done in Hong Kong. I applauded him publicly for that. I think that's what we all, as people who love America, need to do. As for what they're working on today that concerns me, really two things. One, their rhetoric on China has been pretty good. The things that they've talked about there's been a lot of continuity. I was really proud that there was pretty good bipartisan support for the need to push back against the Chinese Communist Party. It always made me, it was always heartening to me to watch, 100-0 votes in the Senate for Hong Kong sanctions and 98-2 votes on issues surrounding the genocide taking place in Western China. I hope that continues, but it's important to watch the actions, not just the words. I hope they won't talk loudly and carry a small stick. That is dangerous. And so we need them to deliver on the commitments that they've made to kind of follow through in the same way that the Trump administration did. In the Middle East, I'm less optimistic. They have a fundamentally different worldview than we do, and we can talk about that if you'd like. And then the last thing I'd say is, in the end, as a Secretary of State, you deliver against a president's foreign policy, and you have an imperative to make sure you understand the commander's intent. What's the top line view? President Trump's top line view was America first. We're going to make sure that the things we do serve our citizens well. And that's complicated to execute, but the mission statement was crystal clear. My guess is that the mission statement inside this administration looks like climate change first.
Yeah, no question.
And the decisions that will flow from that, the policies that will emanate from putting climate change a priori as the highest and most noblest thing. I use that word noblest intentionally. Noblest thing that one can do doesn't portend well for our security.
No, I mean, look, I couldn't agree more. Let's go back to the Middle East. You were involved in so many things. I mean, I look back and preparing to talk to you today, and I mean, literally end of the globe, you were involved in an incredible amount of things. But I think obviously one of the bigger accomplishments of the Trump administration is what you were able to accomplish in the Middle East. What are these guys doing?
So it was a group of us. I don't take credit for this. This was a team. This was myself, Jared Kushner, Secretary Mnuchin, President, our Ambassador Friedman, our ambassadors in the Emirates, Ambassador Ricolta, Ambassador Abizaid in Saudi Arabia, a big team that all came together around a central understanding, which was, for 40 years, we'd said, let's solve this fight between Israel and the Palestinians. And until we do, we're just going to do nothing. The previous administration, the Obama administration, had taken one further fill-up to that, said, and if we can't solve that, let's kind of deal with the Iranians that hands them a bunch of money and creates the wealth and power so they can, too cynical, so that they'll have the capacity to underwrite Hezbollah and the Iraqi militias and the like. We flipped that all on a script. We said, look, Iran is the central animating force for instability in the Middle East, the regime in Iran. Second, we'd love to see the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians resolved, but we're not going to let them have a veto on further progress. And then lastly, we began to work with the countries in the region to make the case for why collectively they could create more prosperity and more security for their own people if they would come together. And the resulting effect of that was a number of things, including the Abraham Accords, which I am convinced will make life better for everybody who lives in the Middle East. It's historic. I don't think it will be undone, because I think now the people in Bahrain and in the United Arab Emirates and in Sudan and Morocco will come to see the enormous personal benefits that accrue to them from it. And I don't think they'll let their governments go back. I'm optimistic that that desire to integrate diplomatic, economic, security relationships between the Gulf states and the Israelis will only continue to grow.
How much of those accomplishments do you think are a result of thinking outside the box and approaching things a little differently? There's a joke in DC about foreign policy establishment, and that there's really no difference between conservatives and liberals over a period of 30 so years. Yeah. And obviously you guys took an extremely different approach to that, and it was difficult, right? I mean, you talk about the deep state. I mean, the existence of the deep state, to the extent that there is a big one, it resides right squarely where you were presiding.
Yes. It's true. Look, we had two things going for us. The first is we had a president of the United States who was willing to break glass and prepared to deliver on the promises he'd made. So he said he was going to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, right? He said he was going to do it. A lot of presidents campaigned on it. President Trump said, I said I was going to do it. And so it took us a bit. But in the end, the establishment said there would be Intifada 9 or World War III or whatever the heck it was. Right. we were pretty confident that we could manage this. And the timing was right. So we did, and it was the right thing to do, and we didn't have World War III, and I think the Palestinians came to see that we were serious about delivering on the promises that we'd made. And so whether it was my announcement about settlements saying, hey, some of these settlements are actually legal. They're not every settlement's unlawful. That sent the UN into orbit. It sent, frankly, Republicans and Democrats from the foreign policy establishment into orbit, but it was actually true. And so we recognized that reality. And so we did have this advantage of we were prepared to break with things that had historically underpinned foreign policy in the United States and think them through and take some risks. Mm-hmm. And, not all of them were successful. There's things I wish we had more time to go fix and build. But in most cases, we left these places, certainly the Middle East, in a far better place than when we came in for the 4 years we were there.
Yeah, well, that actually is an interesting segue because I did want to talk about, much of foreign policy is just a constant evolution, right? And there's no static moment in time like, hey, problem fixed, right? Everything is changing. There are different world leaders, different personalities, different agendas. What are those things that you think of that, man, I just wish we had like 3 or 4 more years to deal with that?
It reminds me, I was with Secretary Baker, who is just a wonderful human being and was so kind to me, both as CI director and as Secretary of State. I called him, I can't remember what I was talking about, and I was whining a little bit, I suppose. Look at this hard problem I have in front of me. And he said, young man, that problem's been around a lot longer than you have. And, he was right. He reminded me of what he had done and how he had thought about that problem, 35 years before me, 40 years before me. Look, the thing that really is going to require all our focused attention over the coming years and decades is the threat that emanates from China and the Chinese Communist Party. So I think we awakened the world to this challenge. A lot of us had slept on this for too long. The United States included, many other countries just closed their eyes, turned the other cheek, and sold them stuff or outsourced labor there. And we didn't recognize the fact that they are determined to undermine our republic, our way of life. We flipped that. There's no doubt about it. I think we changed the world's view on this. So we started to climb out of this attention deficit and to build out a rubric of policies that will impose cost on China for their malign activity or for its malign activity. There's still a lot of work there to do. A lot of thinking, a lot of strategic thinking that yet needs to be done, a lot of diplomatic work, and then a whole bunch of work to continue to build out a set of central understandings that will unite the West, those of us who believe in human dignity and freedom and the things that America values and democracies around the world value, to build them out collectively to make sure that the next 100 years are 100 years where the West still gets to set the rules. That's certainly better for the United States. I am convinced it's better for every human being on the planet.
How much do you think it is such a complex problem? I mean, you're entirely right. How much do you think our building of the success that you've had vis-a-vis China is about maintaining sort of technological advantages? Because we've seen what they're trying to do with Huawei and, basically across the board, make the world reliant upon Chinese infrastructure. How much of that do we need to think about as Americans and making sure that we've got an entirely separate brand that promotes our values and protects our national security?
Yeah, this is a central question. I think about it in 2 buckets, discrete buckets, recognizing that they're not completely discrete. The first one is things that matter for American national security. So let me identify something that might not. A plastic toy. Oh, okay, fair enough. Walmart, Target wants to bring in a plastic toy. This is a separate set of issues from things that directly relate to American national security. Things like the capacity to do high-end semiconductor manufacturing in the United States. Things like rare earth minerals, making sure that we have a supply chain here in the United States that can deliver should the Chinese Communist Party ever decide to shut it down. So I put those in a national security bucket. A piece of that is what you referred to. We need the best AI here in the United States. We need it patented in the West. We need it controlled by Western companies that will apply property rights and the rule of law and an ethical morality norm to these practices. Blockchain technology, machine learning, all the things that are at the forefront of cutting edge technology, the United States and the West must continue to invest in and make sure that we understand it in a way that can protect and preserve our freedom here in the United States. Then there's a second set of things. I joked about the plastic toy. There's a set of things that I would describe as more commercial, which accrue to economic benefits. There's places there where we can absolutely find ways that the West will end up interacting with China. But even that trade has to be conducted on a fair and reciprocal basis. Even that trade can't be based on human slavery, right? I mean, today you have companies making money off slaves in China. We went through this in the 1860s. we shouldn't revert to those norms. And Sam, I think if we've offshored that problem set, if we've offshored this forced labor, this idea of slavery, it's okay because it doesn't happen in America. No, it's still not okay. Those are a broader set of concerns. The trade relationships and the obligations to treat every human being with dignity are things that are broader. They go past the national security imperative, but are also something we have to confront with China.
Yeah, gosh, I could talk with you for 2 hours about China. There's very few people who have so much texture and so much perspective on that. I appreciate it. But I do want to get to one thing before we get to our three questions, because it's so outside of the box. North Korea. I imagine when you took the job, you probably didn't think that you were going to be in North Korea at some point.
Yes, that is a fair presupposition.
Tell me about that experience.
Remember the first time I go there, it was a CIA director, and I go there on a clandestine trip, not a publicly announced trip. I left on Good Friday, so we're coming up on the anniversary of my first trip there. I left on Good Friday morning. I came back. I got back late Sunday night, Easter Sunday night, or I can't remember. Might have been Monday morning, to try and help the president deliver against fire and fury. Right? You'll remember he thought we were in a really tense situation, and so we were trying to take the tension level down and create a situation where we could have a rational discussion. The president was prepared to consider whether a summit might be appropriate. It was really quite the experience. I can't say everything about it, but no, you don't. When I became CI director, I had no earthly idea that one day I'd be on a quiet plane traveling in the dark to land at a airstrip in Pyongyang to meet Chairman Kim, who committed the most horrific crimes against humanity, who had put Otto Warbear in prison and then returned him to us, only to have him perish as a result of how they treated him. It was quite the. I had a couple months to prepare for it, but nothing can quite prepare you for being there. I regret that we didn't make more progress. We convinced him not to do more nuclear testing and more long-range missile testings, but we weren't able to get him to give up his nuclear program. We got 3 Americans back. It was the most lovely, wonderful moment of my time as Secretary of State to show up at Joint Base Andrews and watch those 3 Americans climb off that beautiful American airplane, who had been held there. We got the remains of 50 plus service members whose remains were in Korea. We got them returned to the United States, ultimately to their families. It was quite the experience. And then the 2 summits where we had moments where I thought we might actually make progress, only to find that we had to settle for something less than what we would have hoped we could ultimately get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, never a dull moment for you in your tenure. Well, you did a superb job.
Thank you, Josh.
I got 3 questions for you. They cut to the heart of everyone, Secretary.
Yes, sir. Go.
So, the first one is, your last meal on Earth, what would it be?
No brainer. Pizza.
That's great. Any particular kind of pizza?
That's a little controversial. I don't know if you saw the story. The State Department redacted the ingredients that I like on top of my pizza, so I'm not going to tell you.
That's classified?
Some FOIA request, they blacked it out. I don't even know why. All in all, give me beef or pepperoni or something that's meat lovers.
We got classified information here, folks. We know what's on top of the pizza. All right. Second question. If you were not involved in politics and not involved in what you're doing, what would you be doing with your life?
Yeah, probably back doing what I did before I ran for Congress in 2010. I was a small business owner. We had a couple hundred people that worked at a machine shop. I loved every moment of trying to, make customers happy, build out the team, grow the workforce, make some money. I very much loved that. I consider that service too, where we had a couple hundred families that depended on us to be successful, so that they could, go on vacation, whatever it was, buy a motorcycle, take care of their family, send their kids to a school that they wanted their kids to go to. I remember that it was wonderful service as well. I'll probably be back in the private sector doing something like that.
That's great. All right. Third and final question. This one's hard to get around. What motivates Mike Pompeo more, the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat?
It's back to my Wild World of Sports days.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right.
there's nothing like celebrating success as part of a team. There's nothing like setting a mission, driving towards a goal, and getting there, and to look around at the team who delivered and be able to say thank you to them. I think that it's probably the thrill of victory that gets me up every morning, the opportunity to try and get to the end point that we're all looking for.
Well, we are thankful that you've had that opportunity, thankful for your service, and we're going to keep an eye out because that travel schedule looks to me like you're not going anywhere for a while.
Thanks, Josh. If you see me in Iowa again, report back.
All right. Thanks again.
So long, my friend.